Rydo, and we're back Friday, November 5th. Starting a little later today. Stayed up, honestly stayed up too late just watching TV more than even watching Netflix more than actually recording. That being said, I am still playing Opus Magnum. It is just such a weird, like odd command and controlled programming game. Like, it's just not anything close to programming languages like C++ or Python or anything like that where you use text. Instead, it's these weird, small, visual, easy to even confuse visually when you look at them, icons that are just controlling machines, arms, grab arms. And so, really, it feels like it's a programming game for Chinese kids who are going to end up working at a Foxconn factory or similar in China, that maybe if you work hard one day you'll be the person programming the machine assembling the iPhones instead of the person hand assembling the iPhones. But yeah, it totally does not feel like a language that is fleshed out really, that you would really use it in an actual command and control or CNC machine. And the number of CNC programmers, operators, designers in the United States is relatively going to be very few. I guess we can play Bloodhaven or Bloodcraft or Havencraft today. So it's hard to really care about it, and it's histograms. It's high scores, which it displays in histograms that seem to be just like pre-made histograms and don't really seem to connect to an online leaderboard anymore. Its high score does not really make a lot of sense. The idea of trying to reduce the amount of physical space that the mechanisms you're controlling are taking up, again, is just something that you would only care about in a Chinese factory or similar like factory. The idea of reducing the cost of components, and then having specific cost to each components kind of makes sense, but it only makes sense if you're not paying yourself anything at all. If you're getting even like minimum wage to spend the time to write better programs to use one less component, it's not worth it to say, hey, let's try and eliminate this one component. It does make sense if these were if these alchemy programs, designs that you're making in the game were going to be made in mass production, and it was the equivalent of trying to just reduce the parts count or the cost of pieces in some cheap electronics device. But yeah, it definitely comes from that perspective. And so I don't know if it's really that educational, really. Like, yeah. Plus, I don't find it that intriguing as far as programming. And what's further crazy about Opus Magnum, and Opus Magnum really is going to probably just scare me away from ever playing any of the other Fartronics games, is that the achievements are around playing this other game that's in there that's basically like something that you might want to play 4 or 5 times just for fun, just to take a break. Closest match I'd say is it's something close to like Chinese checkers with the marbles, but what closer to a match 2 game gameplay mechanic. So you don't just jump over a marble to remove it, you have to match different colored marbles for to remove them, and then there's some more rules that makes that more complicated than it should be, or more difficult than it should be. It's not that complicated. But the problem is all the achievements revolve around winning that side game over 100 times. By my calculation, you're going to have less than 50 puzzles, programming challenges in the main game. So for every single programming challenge, they're expecting you not just to play the side game once, but to win the side game twice. If you want to get the achievements, and the side game's not fun by any means. It's not what I came for when purchasing and deciding to play Opus Magnum. So yeah, I'm just. It takes a lot of time to program them. I finally did get the very first tutorial puzzle that scored down to the point where I had the lowest amount of cost, lowest amount of cycles, which cycles is the only metric they meet that actually makes any sense to a programmer as something you would try to optimize, is just how to reduce the amount of code. But even in that case, and this was true for like human resources machine too, all you're doing is just doubling your code and making it repetitive and redundant and confusing by just having two things do the same thing but at a staggered offset is about the best you can pull off because of the physical limitations. If this was just code outside of physical limitations and the rules were slightly tweaked, you could probably optimize it to do 4, 5, 6 things at the same time. And since the results always want you to just to make 6 copies of everything, then yes, you could have it do it all in one fell swoop and reduce the number of cycles. But the interface is totally broken. Even at 1080p resolution, where it gives you a little bit more space, you really can only have 7 components that you're controlling before you have to scroll down, and you can really only have, I would say, maybe 50 by 40 components on screen before you're having to pan around the workforce, the table. Let's go ahead and do this, I guess. It was really only a matter of time, and I really don't even have that much to say, so we'll move on to news fairly quickly. We don't want today to go long. But yeah, it really was only a matter of time until I tried one programming game that really just dropped the ball. Like that was going to happen. Right.
Is that how you treat a lady?
Just play here. I don't think I'm gonna win. Do I have anything else to talk about? I was watching Netflix, this cartoon called Inside Job. I watched all that's available on Netflix, part 1, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. part of the thing I think that happens is you have these comedic cartoons, and they're good for like the first to the second season, and by the time you're about halfway through the third season, they start to lose steam. They start to try and have this overly long connective narrative. You see that with like The Simpsons, even though The Simpsons are just going to go on forever. You see it with Family Guy. Like that everybody just kind of runs out of ideas. I think Futurama probably avoided some of that, but definitely did have some of that. But by getting canceled and coming back and having little breaks in between it. Whereas I would say Rick and Morty, even though they do have long breaks between episodes being released, I think they are kind of constantly thinking and writing and running out of ideas at a certain point. There too, it's just that the animation is taking them way too long for Rick and Morty because I don't think they're paying enough people to animate it fast enough. That is oddly something that only is a problem seemingly with Rick and Morty, compared to every other anime out there that, like, yeah, sure, there have been some animes out there that have really rushed to come out to TV or movies, and then they get tweaked and polished later on the DVD Blu-ray versions, but they still manage to get something. Plus, in all fairness, if you're talking the kind of lackluster animation style of Rick and Morty, there really is no reason why that shouldn't be able to be churned out a lot faster. And certainly South Park, with using computers and like digital technology, established that it can be done to have something that looks like animation, even if it is all digital, come out on a very consistent, quick basis. My blade and my ears work as one. And that by today's technology, you could almost certainly use the same strategy as South Park does and make it look closer to Rick and Morty or just a general cartoon. Anyways, I watched Inside Job, and then I started watching a lot of Lock and Key Season 2. It's too long of a series, frankly, for my taste, Lock and Key, because there's entire elements there that I am kind of checked out on, in the sense that I don't really care about the mother's relationship. I don't really care about the first generation of keepers that they passed away father was the leader of. I don't really care about Dodge, who's the main protagonist. I'm for Lock and Key, I just want to see more about the keys, and I wanted to see them have a lot more fun with the keys, and it doesn't seem like that's the case. Also, I think it's kind of at this point, they have, even if they didn't faithfully recreate the Lock and Key comic book, I think they've loosely covered everything in the Lock and Key comic book manga, Western manga, and so I don't know if they've got anything more they can do. It's a weird show, frankly, that like I would have immediately had to have changed it so that it was adults fighting Dodge, or change it so Dodge, who is the main evil protagonist, just didn't exist, and it was just kids having fun with magical keys. Certainly I would have, if I was a Netflix producer, I would have said Lock and Key could be our Harry Potter. Let's use that to our favor. Let's not really have a bad guy. Let's just say that sometimes some people get the keys and they get corrupted by it, or they do bad things on it because the keys give just so much power to people instead of having a more standard bad guy.
Is fighting and despair all you know?
Um,
Out of my way!
and I definitely would have wanted to see a fairly large FX budget, and Lock and Key has some of that, but then also I think it kind of bogs down in a lot of relationship and talk more than what I think the little kids that you would want to target a show like this to.
Quit while you're ahead, loser.
It is also just incredibly odd how they had to change what Lock and Key really was from the comic book, considering how that had a very dark and kind of weird art style to it. And I vaguely recall, and maybe this is a spoiler for the comic books, I think it ends on a pretty sour note with just everybody dying or something like that in the comic book. So
Hey,
yeah, I don't think the TV series is going to go that way. But you have these child actors, and Netflix has shown that they are fairly bad about they're fairly bad about producing things quickly. So you have things like Lost in Space, which is taking way too long to record, and you have these young actors, and they're growing up and having growth spurts too fast, and Lock and Key is going to be the exact same problem. I guess meanwhile, like while I was watching Netflix and just kind of relaxing and goofing off, I wasn't scheduling videos. Once again, I am uploading videos, but now with my new internet service provider, the upload speed's so fast that any real delay that I once had as far as uploading videos is no longer really an issue at all. Things can, like entire chunks of videos, like 15 hours of videos, can be uploaded after I stream every single day, or every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday when I stream, without any concern of that messing with bandwidth or anything like that. Speaking of videos, it probably doesn't matter to anybody but me, but Lego Pirates of the Caribbean has Content ID claimed music in every single episode, so like if I was monetized, putting out a Lego game is probably one of those games that A, gets a lot of views, but B, actually would never get a lot of ad revenue because of that issue of Content ID claims, and Warner Brothers in particular putting music in Lego games that are Content ID matched. But I don't want to whine about that. It won't really affect anybody else other than maybe there will be ads run on my channel, and I won't be making any revenue on that. Like, arguably, that does hurt the concept of trying to say, hey, this channel is fully Patreon supported, which a lot of content creators are going in that direction to say, we are making our content ad-free on YouTube because we are being so overly supported on Patreon. Well, it's hard to make that argument if then other Content ID matches are still putting ads on the channel. That it's hard for people to recognize that's what's going on, and it makes people look like a liar. Speaking of liars, here's a good transition. YouTube Creators puts out this comment, which, like, this is a bad thing to even bring up. Are you currently working another job while maintaining your channel? Respond to this tweet with your best piece of advice for balancing your job and creating ... down below. P.S. We see you and we're proud of you. Well, the lie, like most lies these days, which are often not spoken, was that you could be a YouTube content creator and that could be a job and that would pay for you. But the reality, and even they're admitting the reality, is now, no, you can be a YouTube content creator and try and be famous, but you're gonna waste your life and your spare time if you do that. And there is no work-life balance or job balance and creating balance. Not even if you just had no friends and no family, you really wouldn't have that. If I was working another job, I would definitely not be making any. I am surprised I lost there. I definitely would not be able to make as much content as I do, if even consistently make content at all on YouTube. I probably would just completely abandon the idea of making content. It would be very slow. My channel would turn into something that maybe a lot of people could ingest a lot better, because all of a sudden there would be maybe one pre-recorded video airing per month, and maybe I'd be streaming the same amount, but probably not. Like,
You dare to defy the shadows?
almost certainly I would have to just stop covering video game news at a certain level, stop covering the games, definitely stop covering just all the games that come out on Steam, really stop caring about trying to get daily quests on Shadowverse or any collectible card game. These streams, instead of being like 3-hour long epics, 3-4 hour long epic streams, would soon become like hour long, hey, I'm just popping in to say hi type experiences.
A precious life deserves a precious death. More jewels, more.
YouTube is also trying to heavily promote its Instagram clone of YouTube Shorts, and basically saying, hey, you can monetize here even if you're not monetized in our channel, which the only reason they would be doing that is because they want to bring over Instagram people who haven't done anything on YouTube, and at some point they are just going to arbitrarily bring in requirements that if you're going to get monetization on YouTube Shorts in the long run, you're going to have a lot of followers still, and at some point all of YouTube, all of Google, all of Alphabet is still around the AdSense and advertising, and they are going to have to try and figure out some way to put ads into the YouTube Shorts, one way or another. And once they start, if YouTube Shorts completely beat Instagram and Instagram died and there was just no other short video platform out there, or no other thing that people had moved to, undoubtedly YouTube would add ads to it and make it just a horrible experience.
Your shining faith will carry
That was almost amusing.
Oh, I did want to. I was saying I enjoyed Inside Job, which is basically a funny comedy. But what I was trying to say there, and I don't know if I really made sense there, is that it really feels like a concept where Inside Job, I would love to see it have 1, maybe 2 more seasons, and then kind of nothing more. Or at the very least, I would like to see something like Inside Job coming out fairly frequently on Netflix because you have that streaming issue instead of the weekly release that you normally would have.
Don't forget to snag some merch.
Yeah. And as stupid as it might sound, I kind of do feel like I want to go back into the old ways of doing things, and I probably would have enjoyed Inside Job a little bit more had they put out fewer one episode a week. And the only way they could really get around that is that they need to put out like something like a Family Guy with a new premise, a new concept, new characters, every 3 or 4 weeks, like once a month minimum, because yeah, I can easily go a month without checking anything else out on Netflix, and particularly something like Family Guy, some animated comedy show. But if they can't just constantly put out new concepts, then it sucks. What can I say?
That was almost amusing.
Yeah, they probably should just go back to the old style. Just one episode a week. Anyways, let's talk about video games. So, Video Game Chronicle says Square Enix is claiming Crystal Dynamics was the wrong fit for the disappointing Marvel's Avengers. It's fairly common here where Square Enix is setting up people to fail. It seems fairly obvious that is what's happening in the back room conversations of Square Enix, is that Square Enix really only cares about Final Fantasy. It really is this Japanese company that really is just trying to promote their own thing, and then they keep partnering with people like Crystal Dynamics, and this is the same thing with the creators of Hitman, is that the creators of Hitman are well, it was fairly obvious they were getting treated poorly. They were giving bad budget. They were being told or what to do and given bad direction. And then when Hitman didn't sell as much as Square Enix wanted, they blamed the creators of Hitman. It's really a almost oddly non-Japanese attitude that Square Enix has, in which they are not saying sorry or taking the blame, which is typically for individual Japanese people exactly what you say is you always apologize and you always take the blame even if it's not really your fault. And I think on the other side of that thought, Square Enix is demanding that Crystal Dynamics falls on its sword. What I would want to do here is, just for research purposes, if I look at Crystal Dynamics Wikipedia site, and then we look at games developed, we have, let's see, Crash and Burn. These are fairly old games. Total Eclipse, Offworld, Interceptor, The Horde, Gex, Samurai Showdown, Solar Eclipse, Slam and Jam, 2, Blazing Dragons, Sleety Baseball, Pandemonium, Gex, Ender the Gecko, Akuji the Heartless, interesting, Gex 3, Legacy of Kain, Soul Weaver, that's a big success, Walt Disney World Quest, Magical Racing Tour, 102 Dalmatians, Puppy to the Rescue, Soul Weaver 2, Mad Dash Racing, Blood Open 2, Legacy of Kain, Defiance, Whiplash. Now arguably maybe Crystal Dynamics doesn't have any of these people who worked on these games still employed. Tomb Raider Legend, Tomb Raider Anniversary, Tomb Raider Underworld. You would think with all of these, Tomb Raider, Lara Croft, Guardian of the Light, Tomb Raider Reboot. Yeah, I think this one in particular says that Crystal Dynamics can make good games if they're given the budget, and that there is a large difference between the Marvel game, Marvel Avengers, in this as far as visuals and as far as gameplay mechanics. It's hard to believe that it was solely Crystal Dynamics' idea to try to put in microtransactions and try and
The greater your sin, the crispier I make you.
try and make it a highly monetized, repetitive RPG game. Now, arguably, maybe that's Disney and Marvel that was giving the notes, and Square Enix is literally blaming Crystal Dynamics because they can't blame Disney and Marvel. That might be the backroom agreement, and maybe Crystal Dynamics themselves knows. Wow, 15 damage. Maybe Crystal Dynamics and Square Enix secretly both admit that it's actually Disney's fault, and but Disney from the outside looks like a very hands-off licensee at the moment. Let's see, they do seem like they have Crystal Dynamics has some side teams that work on other things, so it is possible that the actual team that worked on Tomb Raider Reboot, Rise of Tomb Raider, were not the same people that worked on Marvel Avengers. That is a slight possibility. But yeah. To say Square Enix wasn't the right fit might be true, because maybe the right fit would have been to have a much cheaper company, not Crystal Dynamics or Square Enix, behind a game like this and make it into a cell phone game. Honestly, if Marvel Avengers had just been a cell phone game, then I don't think too many people would have cared too much. Here you can see the controversies of adding XP boosts. It's already in the Wikipedia article. But yeah, if it were just a one-time thing, you might be able to see the story some other way. But this is kind of the second time Square Enix has blamed a Western company it acquired. And why did Square Enix even bother to acquire companies if they were just trying to buy scapegoats that they could blame their own failures for? Everything I've heard, and I find it very believable as far as hearing these rumors, is that Square Enix is a terribly run company these days, and that they totally don't support and sabotage and kind of actively sabotage the Western companies they've acquired. It's a good argument for a little bit of some protectionism / isolationism. Just the different cultures lead to different levels of acceptable abuse you can put on your subsidiaries and your employees. There is a decent argument to say we shouldn't let companies like Crystal Dynamics, which I think is in Canada, let's just assume it's in Canada for this argument, maybe the Canadian government should do a little bit of protectionism and say, hey, our video game companies cannot be subsidiaries or owned by Japanese companies, because Japanese people treat Japanese employees so differently in a way that would just be completely unacceptable if Square Enix was a Canadian company that acquired Crystal Dynamics. If they were both Canadian companies, there would be unions, there would be strikes, there would be just no way that the thought would even cross the minds of a local company to treat their employees and their subsidiary that way.
Raise the price.
Like, particularly in Japan, worker abuse is fairly standard in many, many different forms, and bullying is fairly standard in school and in work in many, many forms. And yeah, to protect employees in your country, it probably does not help anything to have them be subsidiaries in another country. Yeah, I think that would help a lot in a lot of ways.
Waffle cakes.
We see that more locally, where you have like Middle Eastern diplomats who are basically abusing the maid and the staff, because in the Middle East it's perfectly acceptable to have basically a slave. And while that probably shouldn't be acceptable anywhere, it is. And so, since people don't all think the same or come up in the same societies, it doesn't make a lot of sense to allow one society's bad influences infect another society's. On a smaller scale, if somebody was what would be a great example? If somebody was a murderer in one western town in the old day, it doesn't make a lot of sense to say, well, instead of jailing this person or hanging them for murder, let's just let them move to the city down the street, and then they can just be the city down the road's problem. Like, or maybe it's acceptable to be a murderer in this city, but the next city wouldn't let people be a murderer in their city. That's a bad example. I could probably spend some time to think of a better one, but yeah. Arguably, I guess the sex tourism argument is the best comparison there. If the statute of limitations, no, not statute of limitations, if the age of consent in the United States, for instance, is it varies by state, I think somewhere between 16 and 18, mostly 18. We generally assume it's 18. It is also illegal then for somebody to go to, say, Singapore expressly for the intent of hiring a 14-year-old prostitute, even if there is no age of consent in Singapore. So there is definitely precedent for the idea of enforcing your morals and your rules and regulations on everyone who either is a subject of your land, or a citizen of your land, or works and lives and interacts with your land.
I've got this under control.
And generally, and I'm doing an economics rant here, I just don't believe in big business. I think it doesn't work. I think it doesn't work for the employees and society in general. I don't really believe in the concept that corporations, if they're supposed to be individual entities, should then be able to own another individual entity, because at that point you're talking slavery. Like, are you not? If a corporation is a person, and I'm overly simplifying this, but if a corporation is a person them owning another person and telling them what to do, and them having no recourse, that subsidiary having no recourse to stop listening to that first person. How is that not a equatable to slavery? But I mean, there's a lot of reasons why big businesses should not be allowed. I mean, all business should be limited to much smaller groups of people. Small enough groups where threats of a strike or unionization should really scare them.
Impossible.
Anyways, let's get back to video game news. PlayStation now has reportedly made a 5% investment in Devolver Digital, which is interesting because Devolver Digital also, I think, just IPO'd. Video Games Chronicle says Nintendo has conceded it won't be able to meet the Switch demands this holiday. We can't produce enough to meet the demands we are expecting. Forza Horizon 5 includes car horns based on Banjo, Kazooie, Doom, and others, which honestly I don't think that really is adding much to any game to just have silly car horns. It's something, certainly, but it really does feel like that's a lot of licensing that even if you're not paying anything in a licensing fee, it feels like you've just added a whole bunch of stuff to a game that could easily cause that game to be removed from sale in a couple of years because you don't want to bother to renew the licenses. At a certain point, you'd maybe make those DLC, and then you could take the DLC offline while keeping the main game online. Oddly, we have never seen that be the scenario, though. It would make a lot of sense for all the music in something like GTA to simply be a music pack, free download to add to your game. It doesn't take up space if you don't want to listen to that type of music. So you would just have different radio stations as DLC. Well, as soon as you lose licenses on one radio station, you remove that radio station. Heck, even if you can renew most of the songs but not all of the songs, it still would work fairly well to be able to just change that bit of DLC. So that the few offending songs are removed and everything else is still available. But we never see that. Except for maybe in some Japanese games. Like sometimes you'll get costumes that are exclusive DLC, but I've never really heard a case where the license has run out on any of those collaboration costumes or anything. If anything, it works better because in the Japanese games, if there's a specific costume that is being sold separately, it is usually making just consistent revenue, so everybody involved wants to keep it in play and available for purchase.
You must make the first move.
Moving on, next week's free Epic Games Store content has been revealed. Rogue Company Season 4 Epic Pack will replace Avian Colony, which oddly, I think this might be the first time that you're getting basically a DLC element for Epic Games instead of a free game. I imagine you still probably would have to own the base game of Rogue Company to play this. yeah, it definitely feels like Epic has
Scatter like
run out of games that they can give away, which makes sense. That was going to eventually happen. Is there any way I can... do anything here? Video Game Chronicles says you can now browse all 9,000 plus new items in Animal Crossing's latest update because of data mining. If anything, what that really just goes to show is that
if they don't
there
kill you
is
first.
probably more than you need as far as items. But then
This'll be over quick.
let's see, we see 6 versions of this, so if you take 9,000 and just divide by 6 because you assume that every item is just going to have multiple skins on it, or at least 6 skins on it, you get down to a much more reasonable, like 1,500 items with 6 skins each.
The hour of judgment has come.
At the end of the day, I still don't feel like Animal Crossing is anything I'd want to play, even though a lot of people seem to have liked it for a while. I haven't heard anybody really talk about it lately.
Beloved Nava.
Video Games Chronicles says Marvel Avengers PlayStation exclusive Spider-Man content is coming this month. I think we had already kind of heard about this, so this is...
This'll be over quick.
well, I think this had already been announced. Video Games Chronicle says Nintendo plans to make more movies based on its games, but it will go by one. Miyamoto says the Mario movie is pretty much done, and Nintendo is very positive about it. Like, I am kind of interested in seeing what kind of movie it is and how it's received. We may very well not see anything like a Detective Pikachu movie ever again, as Nintendo moves further towards going kid-friendly, and the Sonic movie moves people to going further towards more kid-friendly content.
There is no escape from the apocalypse to come.
So,
Flash of
yeah.
metal, a silent night.
And I'm sure Nintendo, owning the Pokemon Company in part, had some say as far as the creation of the Detective Pikachu movie. But yeah,
Oh, my beloved Nava.
the Pokemon movies will probably still stay exactly the same, and Nintendo is going to just start trying to make other movies. I think fairly quickly also,
What fine threads you have.
Nintendo making movies
Coming at you.
runs into the danger of more video games trying to get into the movie making industry, which is kind of insane. We see that with like Borderlands trying to make movies too. We may be hitting a point where unless it's a Marvel movie, unless Disney is behind it and they've got tons of money, movies are going to start becoming more and more animated in some sort just to save budget, if there's going to be anywhere as many movies as have been made in the past.
I can't hold back.
But yeah,
Void claws. Terminus.
you have to realize though
Your
that
head and body must part
it is,
ways.
in my mind, a step backwards
You disappoint me.
that you would possibly try to make
I can't move.
Sink.
Like the idea that you would possibly try and make a
I never get a chance to see.
a movie instead of a video game, which you just have way better of a chance of success making video games and way less of a potential chance to lose your shirt in making video games compared to making movies.
Useless puppets get no love.
Yeah. Movie theaters are kind of a great example where we have this like real estate ownership crisis, and then you have these giant movie theaters taking up a lot of real estate. Although in all fairness, those two barely even connect as to why they exist.
My veins or your face? Why am I so mad?
A fitting end.
You disappoint me.
But yeah, when you look at movie theaters and just realize how much space is being taken up for giant empty rooms, and even if you're just going to convert that into like mall space where you have more businesses, more small businesses, although malls tend not to actually have small businesses, they just have small shops with big businesses in them, where something like a open air Zocalo type concept, if malls got turned into something like that where you had local farmers selling local foods and local craftsmen selling small hand-built items like clothing, jewelry, purses, things like that. That would be interesting. I don't know if that really works, but it might very well help spread the wealth more.
May as well have fun.
Fresh manna melons and potion fruit.
Will it be crimson red?
Why is it the string? You disappoint me.
There you go. Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of rambling here. Let's move on with the news. PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X consoles will be available to buy at Walmart today, says this article at Video Games Chronicle.
Shall guide you. If they don't kill you first.
A better Ubisoft group seeks public support in its battle for improved working conditions. I assume that's what ABU here stands for. Although the way this is written, it seems like this is a website. Surely you can do better than this .abu, which I don't know if there is a domain that's .abu. You disappoint us, Mr. Gilmo. 100 days, 0 demands met. Again, though, I have to kind of say, like, Gilmo is just not willing to negotiate with terrorists at this point, and I can't. I'm jokingly saying that's what ABU really is. But yeah, none of these accusations, regardless of how much they get repeated by GameDeveloper.com or even Video Games Chronicle, has started repeating them a lot. None of these accusations have stuck. If anything, the Ubisoft has taken people like this who have made these accusations to court and won for slander. So, like, I almost would have to applaud ABU's attempt here. Like, I could think of some games, if I just, some jobs I've had in the past, if I just really wanted to screw with a company, and this is true for everybody, and this is what we have to all realize, is that if anybody really wanted to screw with a company, you could easily make accusations. You could easily bring up like one incident and repeat it over and over again and try to make it seem like a company of potentially hundreds, if not thousands of employees is just overflowing with incidents, when it's just not really true. Like the problem with the believe all victims mentality is that you are willingly and stupidly ignoring the fact that there are just people out there that are immoral or sociopaths who will just lie. Or even if you're not going to go that far, just have a perspective that is not in line with reality. Crazy people exist. Crazy people think things happen that didn't happen. There is such thing as false memories. Meanwhile, if there was really a case, and all society really can do is try to hear cases if you're willing to bring them to dispense justice. Society, governments cannot proactively try and create justice in all cases. We don't have perfect knowledge. We don't have perfect enforcement. We don't have unlimited resources. We're not plugged into a matrix type universe as far as we know that is monitoring each of our deeds. If anything, that is the central concept of heaven and hell, is that there is a godlike being that is watching your deeds, good and bad, and you'll be punished or rewarded for your good or bad deeds in the afterlife. But yeah, the fact that this gets retweeted is really just sensationalist journalism. It just doesn't serve gamers in any way. In fact, it makes the gaming community and gamers less happy. Like, we don't want to see how the sausage is made. We don't want to hear these negative stories. Sometimes maybe you need to hear these stories, but you need to hear them once. You don't need to hear it repeated a million times, particularly when there's not been any new change in the narrative. I'm more than happy to report if Ubisoft is found guilty of doing something, or if real evidence has come out and they admit it. But until that happens, making what is not even a 24-hour news cycle, video game websites, news sites, have made a nearly half a year or longer news cycle around the same general accusations against Ubisoft, and nothing has happened there. And in all fairness, maybe it's tied up in the courts. That could be the case, is that there might be some really legitimate legitimately bad actions that took place, and they just have not gotten to the court case. But even in that case, you've got to go innocent until proven guilty, and just the news needs to respect that and stop reporting accusation after accusation after accusation. Even when you see something like what's his I've forgotten his name, which is crazy to have forgotten the name of the guy who was roofing people. Really old black comedic actor that was once beloved by everybody.
The magic of flowers is profound.
Yeah, I literally can't even remember the name of the guy. The guy who sold pudding pops. Alright, I'll just refer to him as the guy who sold pudding pops, because I literally have forgotten his name.
Stops me once I got my speedy boots on.
Even in the case of that, where he was found guilty of roofing and raping a lot of people, and then released on a technicality.
It won't be long now.
I always catch the varmints.
It would not have been appropriate news reporting to report on these accusations decades earlier if none of them were, if none of the victims were willing to go to court and charge them civilly or criminally. Like, it's not slander to say something that is true. So you can be threatened with slander lawsuits, certainly, but you still would have to go forward. And I guess I'm making a catch-22 in that scenario, aren't I? Like, I'd be okay with them printing the first story of an accusation against the pudding pop guy, but to repeat those accusations over and over again and it never go to a court case is kind of ridiculous. That is the same thing that people had problems with the Michael Jackson scenarios, that there was a lot of accusations or rumors about Michael Jackson, but there was literally nobody that was willing to actually take him to court, even in the case where they were the government was desperately trying to prosecute Michael Jackson.
My thunderbolts shall guide you, if they don't kill you first.
And certainly in the Michael Jackson case, I think at this point, since he managed to die before anybody actually did take him to court, you have to say innocent until proven guilty, regardless of how much it seems like he probably wasn't innocent.
This ends here.
Like, I definitely could see both cases for Michael Jackson, that he is just was such a emotionally stunted person and abused person that he acted very weirdly and didn't realize his actions were looking so odd to people on the outside looking in.
I've got all the magic I need.
Or I could see him also just being extremely rich and powerful and the master manipulator. That scenario also would make some sense. Moving on, back to video game news, because I'm kind of rambling. Trying to put some perspective on some of these stories. Nintendo says it's working on the concept and launch timing for its next console. I think at this point the concept should probably be locked down. Like here you have the idea of integrated hardware of the DS and the Wii, and then that gets combined into the Switch. What they failed really to do at this point, though, is if they're making the argument that the DS and the Wii were two good things that they refined over the decades, in the sense that the Wii was the latest generation NES and the DS was the latest generation Game Boy. Okay, if you take that concept and integrate it, what they failed to do is put out another concept. If Nintendo right now released a very cheap VR headset or some other technology that was separate from the Switch, then you would take that concept and go, okay, well then the next one is going to be a Switch with VR integration. Which... yeah, I guess there could be something like that.
Impressive. Looks like you are.
But they didn't do that, so I can't imagine that the form factor of the Switch is much different than the form factor of the current Switch. Like, if we were going to get really crazy, is there a reason to add a second screen? No. Is there a reason to possibly try and make the Joy-Cons twice as thick, but then have the Joy-Cons potentially break apart? Maybe. Like, if you took a Joy-Con and revamped it so that there was as many buttons on the back as the front, enough that you have at least a D-pad to go up, down, left, and right, and hit A, B, X, and Y, and then have left and right bump, L1, L2 bumps. That would be interesting, because then you could potentially say, in the purchase of a Switch 2, you have 4 controllers ready to go for 4-way gameplay. I don't think you can go any further than that, and that's actually asking quite a lot to squeeze that much circuitry and that much electrical components together. At a certain point, you could do that even right now by just having a sleeve in which you had 4 Joy-Cons hanging off the side of a Switch. If you made the Switch twice as thick, it would be too heavy. So even adding 4 controllers would probably be too heavy. I don't know what you really add. Do you want a camera in front of it? Probably not.
I pray that you will be freed from suffering.
There is the beginnings of technology of like 3DS style vision, but I don't think Nintendo would go back into that direction in which the screen would look 3D, because that caused too much motion sickness and was never used. So really, I think a Switch 2 or whatever it's going to be is literally just going to feel like a Switch 2. It's going to have faster components, more storage space, maybe better screen resolution, but probably not even that much, because they've got to keep the price down. Honestly, if you told me that in 2021 the next Nintendo hardware is not coming out until 2025 or even 2030, but the price is just going to go down and down and down, and everybody's going to have a Switch, and a Switch is going to get down to like $100, it wouldn't be terrible. When you look at like what the Steam Deck is offering, it's offering touchpads, and that's about the only thing that's new there. And arguably, unless Nintendo wants to embrace PC gaming and Linux, which would probably fail miserably, there's nothing to the idea of adding touchpads. Even the PlayStation adding touchpads hasn't really added much. It's not like there's any major standards differences. You could have micro HDMI directly into the Switch and get rid of the dock. You could have USB-C with an Ethernet wired up so that you so you don't need a dock. That's something you could do, certainly. But when you even look at like the improvements of cell phones these days, if you're not going to add crazy new photography stuff to it, which I don't think Nintendo wants kids taking pictures for fear of them taking naked selfies, that there's not a lot being added to cell phones. Not at all. I wouldn't be surprised if the Switch 2 uses the exact same Joy-Con design and is a middle step where you can just bring the Joy-Cons that aren't broken over to the next to the next generation. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Nintendo is saying it's going to use the Switch's success to fund a $900 million development expansion. The company will also invest in non-gaming assets such as movies, and it is not dismissing acquisitions. I think it would be fairly crazy for Nintendo to acquire very many people. It kind of would make sense if Nintendo acquired Sega. But smaller companies, I think it would be weird for them to acquire things like Mercury Stream, makers of the like Metroid Dread. If anything, that would be them admitting that they actually cared about Metroid all of a sudden. If Nintendo acquired Konami, I imagine people would be okay with that, but or Square Enix people would probably be fairly upset with that acquisition. If all of a sudden Final Fantasy 16 was a Nintendo exclusive, yeah, and that is the danger, is that any company acquired by Nintendo all of a sudden becomes a Nintendo exclusive, and we're already decades deep into the grudge against Nintendo not releasing Nintendo games on any other console ever. At a certain point, the only way an acquisition would make sense is if it was actually a merger between Nintendo and some other fictional big company, like, it would have to probably be Microsoft. I can't even think that a merger between Sony, PlayStation, and Nintendo would be on equal terms. But yeah, if there was a merger between Microsoft and Nintendo, and then all of a sudden Microsoft was in charge of a lot of decisions, and we started to see Mario games on PC, this fictional concept would work fairly well if they can actually work together.
Lose yourself in this final dance.
It would work fairly nicely because Microsoft really has no business and very little sales in Japan, where Nintendo has massive sales in Japan. Microsoft has very little sales as far as kids games, where Nintendo has large sales in kids games. Nintendo has very little sales in adult games compared to Microsoft. So that they would work with each other really nicely on paper, but in reality it's just who would be in charge and who would be making the calls. And if it was Nintendo, I don't think that would probably work out. I wouldn't put it past Nintendo merging with Microsoft and then telling Microsoft to stop making adult games or stop doing anything that would make Microsoft.
You were done for.
Just acquiring Microsoft to effectively shut it down.
That was almost amusing.
Yeah, and then if you had a Switch or a Switch 2 that was a very cheap console, and then it became the cheap kids console under the Nintendo brand, and then Microsoft continues to sell the Xbox under the Xbox brand, that they can fill out two very different desires. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle has an article where to buy the special edition Pokemon Switch Lite out today. Where do you buy it? Apparently in the UK. Or you can buy it at Walmart in the US, or Best Buy in the US, or from Games UK or Amazon UK in the UK. This is nice and all, but in reality you don't want to run around without a case even on a Switch Lite, so you're just going to cover that up. And this isn't the OLED version, so you're getting a custom model that, like, ideally you really cared about that case, you would buy the case, then crack it open very carefully, put in the OLED model of the Switch inside the physical constraints of the other component, which might be very difficult to do because the internal components are different. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it is just a fluke that Nintendo's released just the OLED model that only has a better screen. I think it really does highlight that there isn't much more you can do for the Switch, and that they've kind of run out of ideas. Like, at a certain point, I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see just accessories being the default concept, where everybody is getting something like an Apple Watch or a Nintendo Watch that they're wearing to count steps or count movements, or in some other way be a second screen to a Switch 2. I wouldn't be surprised if we start going down that gimmick. I also wouldn't be surprised if they made a Switch 2 and it's just like, now it will play MP3s, which it's kind of crazy. It doesn't play MP3s. Or now it will play like preloaded movies or streaming services and things like that. They just add features that are 100% software based and have nothing to do with new hardware. Until we get to a point where we're starting to use quantum computers, that's what I keep expecting the next big step in computer processing, as far as how it's going to go. Otherwise, we're just going to keep on having more desktop style computers that just have more RAM, more cores, more processing. It's just going to be more and more to make up for bad programming that's less efficient than it should be. But cramming in things like deep learning, super sampling, and such like that into a Switch takes too much power, and it takes too much, produces too much heat. Moving on, the GTA Trilogy console preloading is available now, but PC players must wait until launch, which barely any news around that. That's not even worth mentioning. And then Video Games Chronicle says 8-Bit Christmas is a family movie about an 80s child trying to get an NES, which at that level, then that's probably not that interesting or much of a video game movie as much as you would think. You'd almost have to have flash forwards for this, because, or you'd have to do something crazy there, because when the NES launched, I mean, it's like Super Mario World 1 and Duck Hunt was pretty much the only thing. Yeah. And this seems way too dark for like an 80s movie. Already it's screen, maybe the trailer's doing it wrong. So 1988 is not 83, so you're talking 5 years out of the point where the NES has been made. Yeah, this is going to have extremely little to do with video games, this movie. It's just a gimmick. Yeah. The NES, I believe, came out in 83, 85, somewhere around there. So you're talking, they do point out it was the most popular toy in 88, with the Game Boy following in 89. But yeah, you'd either have to have a lot of references to a lot of things people don't remember, like Ataris and things like that, which that really wouldn't bring people to the movies, or you'd have to do a completely unreliable narrator where it's someone in their mid-30s telling the story to their kids about how hard it was to get the NES when it really wasn't. Definitely feels just like a gimmick and not really worth anybody's time to report, because at a certain point you're just advertising for a movie, a Warner Brothers movie. Which, yeah, it definitely feels like one of those movies that does not really need to be made or released. Moving on, Dragon Quest X's offline details the protagonist, battle systems, vocations, and party. I think we already talked about this. This is a Gamatsu article. Marvel's Midnight Suns has been delayed to the second half of 2022. Nin Nin Days 2 for Switch launches November 18th. This is one of these anime ninja girls in scantily clad lewd outfits. Let's see. And I guess in this case, it being slightly blurred might be a good thing. Ninja girls. This is kind of one of those examples of ninjas really becoming something completely different from what they really were in reality. And in all fairness, I guess that is a long-running tradition as far as ninja to exaggerate and lie about what they really were and what they could really do. But we have gotten very far away from people dressing in all black to hide their identity and running around in the middle of the night to assassinate people, and being like fully clothed head to toe with black cloth. Yep, but a game like this, a romance visual novel like this, definitely not going for realistic depictions. And this one, Nin Nin Days 2, is a visual novel where the Simran Kagura Ex Neptunia game is a RPG game. So I think there's possibly a better argument to play the Simran Kagura Ex Neptunia game. Let's cover just a few games that are available on Steam, so we don't have a ton on Monday. Here we have one called The Mighty Quest, which is $5.99 English and several other languages. German, Spanish, Russian, Chinese, and Ukrainian. I would say the animation here is not quite polished enough for something you'd want to play. Here we have a game called Ancient Dungeon, which just looks like a low polygon dungeon crawler. Early access, $19.99 English, allegedly full audio. Here we have one called Winding Road, which is clearly a low effort game, 59 cents English only. Here we have one called Light Up the Room, which looks like nothing of interest, for 99 cents, allegedly full audio. I think we may have a victory here.
Is that how you treat a lady? It can't end like this.
How many victories do we have now? How many victories do we need? We need, you need by default 3. So, yeah, we've gotten 2. We would need 1 more for the gyms, 2 more for this, and 3 more for this. That's kind of a tall order, but we'll see if we can get it. Here we have a game on Steam called Incremental Cube, which looks like nothing. It's free to play, English only, with in-app purchases. Here we have a game called Gore Prologue, which looks like an asset flip game, and since it's a prologue, we can skip it. It's free to play, it's also Russian only. Here we have a Chinese game, which is probably not anything we could play or would want to play. $1.79, Chinese only. Here we have another Chinese game that looks like more of a mobile phone port tower defense game, a little bit better, visual polished. Again, Chinese only, free to play with in-app purchases. Here we have a game called Void Eclipse, which looks like a card game. It is $35.99, single player only, English only. I'm gonna put this on the fall list, but that seems like a very high price for a game like this. There we got a free victory, which definitely makes that less of a tall order. At this point, the whole battle pass system, I could not care less about. Let's see. Here we have a game, Animal Defense Versus, which looks like a Chinese mobile phone port game of no real interest. Early access, $10.07, Chinese only. You know, if there was a way for me to filter out the non-English speaking games very easily and quickly, I could certainly save myself some time. It'd be very easy and very fair to say I will only talk about games that speak English, that come out in English, because there's no point in talking about games that don't come out in English, or very little point. But that also would highlight basically a need for somebody to work for me, a producer of sorts, to sort through all the games. And yeah, at some point I might, if I became rich, I might hire a producer to do something like that. But I'd have to trust them empirically to not intentionally, like, steer the conversation or censor things. Next we have a game that's, again, looks like a Chinese only game, RPG game. Not really much there that interests me. $9.23, Chinese only. Chinese only games. Here we have one called Soul Sand, which looks like a low effort asset flip Dark Souls attempt. $3.59 is too cheap. English, allegedly full audio. Let's go and play that, I guess. Let's see. Next we have a game called Challenge Dreamcat, which looks like it's just a platformer. Maybe there's a little bit more visual polish here than your average, like, platformer, Infinite Runner. But it still feels very asset flippy and doesn't feel like there's a real reason why you would be doing any of this. 99 cents, claims to support every language that is available in Steam, which again, Steam should just have a couple of fake languages that pop up when you click those check boxes, and just like totally fake made up language. Just like throw in something silly like Klingon, or like I imagine if you went through all the languages that were mentioned in Star Wars, Star Trek, Babylon 5, Lord of the Rings, just take all those fake made up languages and make a list and say every time somebody submits a form, we're going to show 2 or 3 of these, and if they check on these, that sets off a red flag and has this game forwarded to a higher review. Same is true for tags. Just make a list of bad game tags, like things like garbage, stupid, scam, Bitcoin, things like that. Just show those as options and even as suggestions, and if people click on it, then it gets them red flagged. Just put some mines in your system so that you know people are actually looking at the fields and actually speak English, because I think a significant amount of people who are putting games on Steam are not even speaking English. I mean, I don't want to get to the point where it's just downright reading comprehension tests are required before you can fill out a form, but we may need to get to the point where you have to read a short paragraph and then answer 3 questions about that paragraph before you can submit a game on Steam, just to prove that A, you're a human, and B, you're an intelligent enough human to be doing business with. And that's not anywhere really out of line with any other business. If you go and apply for a job, even the like worst jobs, like at McDonald's or as a janitor or something, if you show up and you're just a homeless person and you've just got alcohol on your breath, or you're rambling and insane, and there's just like poop stains on your shirt or something, nobody's gonna hire that. Like that has always been the case, that you have to be within a certain level of agreement as far as what reality is and how people should act and present. And as things have gotten more digital, more and more crazy people, for lack of a better term, have been allowed to be given justification, or given the thought that they should be treated the same way, even though they are completely outside of following societal rules of just like decorum and manners and such. Moving on back to video game news, the Super Mario 3D All-Star version 1.1.1 update is now available. It adds Nintendo 64 controller support to Mario 64, Super Mario 64, specifically, not the other two games, which it's really not letting you remap anything or use the controller for other games. It's just support for that. So you have this case where Nintendo is really screwed up in most people's opinion, because Super Mario 3D All-Stars is out of stock and not available as far as Nintendo is concerned. I'm sure some people have it on the shelves if you can find it. And they put an update for the small number of people that did manage to buy it in the short time it was available for sale to a game, so it controls a controller that is also out of stock. And you can almost excuse the controller being out of stock because of the part shortage. There's really no excuse for the game to be out of stock other than they stopped selling it. So, I mean, just bad business all around, really. And in no way is that a better experience, or even a comparable experience, to just playing a ROM, which that is the real solution here, is just play a ROM. Like, don't care about the legality about it, don't care about anything like that, just play the ROM. You will have a much better experience. Like, there's no reason to support Nintendo when they won't support their own games properly, and they definitely did not support their games properly by putting out a low effort re-release of emulated old Mario games, and then stop selling it, and then not even really patching it or making it run better. Like, Nintendo has the source code, one assumes, for those Mario games, Mario 64, Sunshine, and Galaxy. They should have been able to very easily program a new engine if necessary, or just tweak the old engine, more likely, to run on the Switch, run a lot better, run at higher frame rates, just do things that emulation would have to struggle to try and do a lot more of. Emulation theoretically could always be behind the curve of somebody who has the source code, if the person with the source code cared. And emulation would practically not exist if the person who had the source code actually bothered to just continuously update and release the old software.
Eternal supplication.
Moving on, demo for Switch version 1.11 update is now available, and it adds 13 songs. This is more of a rhythm game. I think it's a worldwide release game, although there is a chance it might be a Japanese exclusive.
Quit while you're ahead,
Gamatsu says Switch's worldwide sales have topped 92.87 million, and The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD tops 3.6 million.
Play.
So yeah, there's a lot of Switches
Play.
out there. They have some more numbers,
I've got
showing Mario
fire.
Kart Deluxe is at the highest of 38.74 million, so
The battle's not over yet.
nobody, like, in general,
Here I go.
a Switch owner is only buying, maybe 1 out of 3 Switch owners are buying Mario Kart Deluxe. 1 out of 6 roughly are buying Super Mario Odyssey. 1 out of 12 are buying Ring Fit Adventure, which I'm sure Nintendo would really have enjoyed if more people had bought,
Smiles are the best medicine.
had all bought more games.
The real battle begins. Faith is an expensive business. No, the smiles are not free.
Let's see. Gran Turismo 7 has Scapes developer diary, not to be misread as Scraps. So I assume Scapes is showing the background in the scapes, the landscapes, I suppose, oceanscapes, things like that. Airscapes. I guess airscapes is a word, maybe. You always do have this weird thing with racing games where you want it to be hyper realistic, more than likely, if the cars look hyper realistic in the landscapes, but then you're putting a lot of polygons and a lot of processing power, GPU power, to display things that you're really just going to drive by. And so you might be able to even claw back a little GPU processing by just blurring everything a little bit as you're moving down that forward direction.
The greater your sin, the crispier I make you.
How? Ow! You little...
There we go. Here we have a game on Steam called Daydream Mosaic. It's just a pick-to-cross game. Looks fine, but not something I think I'd bother playing ever. $8.99 English full audio. Yeah, I think in general I probably would never play a pick-to-cross game. I'd have to find one that was really, really popular and relevant. Here we have a game called Cover Fire, offline shooting game, which looks more visual polished than an asset flip game, but I don't know why you would want to play a free-to-play game that's offline only that has in-app purchases. It says it's English full audio and several other languages. I think that's just really bad marketing, to say the least. If I was making a game that was offline only, I would not highlight that as a sales pitch. I would try and hide it as much as possible.
The words escape me.
Let's see. Yeah, we have a game called Hotel on the Great, which looks too weird and too low effort for my taste. Free, English only. It's kind of weird to say it looks too weird for my taste. I kind of love everything weird, but it looks too low effort for my taste, really. That's what I should have said. Here we have a game called Planet Drop, a tiny space adventure, which looks like nothing that would interest me. I'm not that into space games, free single-player games. Seeing more free games than I would have thought. Here we have Fears of Glasses 00, which seems like you have to wear the glasses in the game to see monsters, which seems like kind of a silly gameplay mechanic. Like, generally when you have a game where you have to wear glasses, you put on the glasses at the very beginning of the story and then you forget that they even exist.
Is that how you treat a lady? Ow!
Go ahead and
You're
take that
strong.
victory. Ignoring the glasses gimmick, which I don't like at all. It's just in the way visually. The rest of this game does kind of just feel like it's a collection of horror monsters that are probably asset flips. And I don't know if there really is anything else I'd want to see here. $5.99. Again, claims to support every language that Steam supports.
I pray that you will be freed from suffering.
And yeah, we just need like one more victory and then we are done for today. Gametsu says Devolver Digital has acquired Dodge Roll, Narrow, and Firefly Studio as it goes public. NetEase, Sony Interactive Entertainment, and more are among the first investors. So NetEase has 7.9%, whereas Sony Interactive Entertainment Europe Limited has 5%. So it's the European division of Sony that bought shares in it. And again, the idea of owning shares in a company, if you think of a company as a person, is to basically the idea of like, I don't know how investing in a company does not translate, if you say corporations or people, into slavery again. Like, free people are not owned by any percentage. Although in all fairness, maybe free people are owned by a lot of people because they have massive amounts of debts that they own. Although there is a slight difference between a real human being owing people like $100 and a real human being having to pay 1% of their revenue every month for the rest of their life, and having no way to get out from under that.
You crossed the line.
As far as percentages of people who own Devolver Digital, Harry A. Miller IV owns 22.17% of shares, and barely anybody else, as far as directors, own any shares at all. And I suppose it is worth mentioning that there is this level of nepotism and cronyism and insider trading that happens in all initial public offerings, in the sense that there is a certain limit, if you are below that, in which you can have people invest in your business before you have to go public and be available for purchase amongst the public. And so those investors that get in before it is something that everybody can be involved in do manage to make more profit by just getting in even a day early. Generally, as far as initial public offerings go, that first day there is a high bull effect in which the valuation and the prices go higher and higher, and so you can kind of day trade and sell in the first day, sell some of your shares and make more profit than anyone else. Also, these cronies that were able to buy it before it was available for purchase, buy-in before it was available for purchase to the public, almost certainly did not have to pay the price that people buying on day one of an initial public offering have to pay. And that is just one of the forms in which insider trading, the concept happens, and yet technically, by the letter of the law, it isn't prosecuted or treated like insider trading. Moving on, Gamatsu says Elden Ring has a 19-minute gameplay preview video and a collector's edition was announced. Which, okay. It's kind of funny, the Japanese versions of these videos are not age restricted, and yet every other version of the videos are age restricted. I feel like you have this risk here, since Elden Ring was announced just far too early, of people expecting it to be the next Bloodborne, the next Dark Souls, and then finding out that it isn't quite as popular, even if it is fairly the same type of game. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just not as popular as Bloodborne or Dark Souls, and then people are gonna feel like it was just overhyped, because it definitely is at the risk of being overhyped. Here we have a game on Steam called Industry Mania, which looks like nothing of interest. $1.99 English only. I assume this is some kind of time management simulation game.
Dance for your life. Stop.
Here we have a game called Polgar Magic Detective, which looks like it's a point and click adventure game. There might be something here, but I suspect not. The animation looks nice, but what they're actually showing you isn't much of anything. $11.99 English, Spain, Spanish. I'll put it on the follow list though. We'll give it a chance. Let's see. Gamatsu says Total War Warhammer 3 launches February 17th and is coming to Xbox Game Pass on day 1. The Warhammer series, Warhammer 22K series has always felt like a bit of a failure more than, seems like it fails way more than succeeds. But I guess this is in the past Warhammer stuff that is closer to a World of Warcraft type game. So there might be a chance there, but I don't recall the Warhammer series succeeding either. And maybe the sub-series of Total War Warhammer has succeeded, but I'm not sure. Let's see, I guess we could do a little bit of investigation here and see if we could find a Total Warhammer 2. Yeah. Total Warhammer 2 on Steam. Feels a lot like Heroes of Might and Magic. It may very well be not too far away from that. We can see it's very positive. Then there's a lot of DLC. Also, it doesn't seem like it's gone on sale that much. Do they have a Total War Warhammer 1? Yes. Interesting. And yet this is not on my wish list. I don't see a reason why it wouldn't be on the wish list if the second game was. Total War Warhammer 1. Its lowest price, $14.99 in its entire life since 2016. So yeah. Maybe I could be convinced to try the Total War Warhammer series, but I probably have better things to do with my time in the next few years. Gamatsu Date Night Bowling launches November 26th for Switch and PC. So is it going to be a decent bowling game or a bad bowling game? Or is it going to be a dating game? Is it going to be a decent dating game? I don't know how many people bowl or go on dates going bowling. Like, it's not a bad idea, certainly, to try and figure out something to do. Particularly if we start to see less and less movies that you would take somebody out on a date to go to a movie, which that is your typical thing, to go out to a movie. And I would not even dare to venture to guess how you would have a date if you were a teenager and you were bringing them home to watch like Netflix. Yeah, I don't know if that would turn into a lot of Netflix and chilling or not. Because generally when you are dating, you're trying to have a individual relationship with just that person where your family and friends are not around. I think probably the newer generations are much more comfortable with girlfriend, boyfriends, just kind of hanging out in general. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's not completely uncommon for people to just swing by their houses and hang out. Instead of having proper, like, bespoke, separate dates. And I was listening to a comedian talk about how his father told him that he straight up should be dating 3 other people, 4 other people, and how dating worked when his father was a youth. And there is something certainly to that thought, where as it's depicted in the West in media, that you just like date one person and then you're immediately going steady with them, particularly in TV and movies because they don't want to hire a bunch of actors. But in reality, like, the idea of dating is to try out relationships and get through a lot of people before you find the person that you think you're most compatible with. And it's always been a tragic story to say you married the first person you dated and you never dated anyone else. So I think I would probably encourage the idea that you should have like several partners dating, several girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever you want. And not immediately be exclusive. And certainly in the older days, in Victorian times, you would go on like arranged dates, and you would just be arranged or set up to go on dates with people that you've never met or never even cared about.
I'll see you in purgatory.
But yeah, to get back to this game, Date Night Bowling, this looks like this is mostly bowling. Which, not terrible. It's really just going to come down to, is it a decent bowling game? It's not a very visually polished game when you think about the idea that it is a bowling game. It is kind of weird to put the date night aspect to it and then have several characters that you select that have different power and spin stats. Are we trying to get one more victory? Yes, we are. Moving on, Rune Factory 4 Special for PS4, Xbox One, and PC launches December 7th. Rune Factory is always the one that feels like it would be a match 3 game, but in actuality it is a JRPG game.
Is fighting and despair all you know?
And like every time I look at any of these trailers and see them blurred, I have to remind myself that I probably just need to mention, yeah, I'm blowing them out. Maybe at some point I'll just find some equilibrium there and stop mentioning it and wait for people to ask in the chat if they care. Moving on, Marvel Avengers adds Claw Raid, PlayStation exclusive Hero Superman on November 30th. Again, this is the Marvel Avengers game that I don't think anybody cares about, so no reason to really go further into that report. I'll keep my eye out for this. The Pokemon Trading Card Game Live has a Canadian mobile soft launch and global desktop open beta being delayed to 2022. But the pictures here definitely are expanding on what I thought it might look like. Sadly, it's just one picture. The race is certainly on in my mind. If this comes out even in an open beta, I think day one I'm gonna try to play it. And fingers crossed it doesn't get Content ID claimed by somebody. That being said, if the Marvel Double Second Dinner collectible card game from Ben Brode, if that gets made and released before the Pokemon trading card game, then I would just play that. Although, in all fairness, I think I still probably would want to do an open beta for the Pokemon card game and try it out. It would just be playing two of them. Maybe at the same time, which that's going to be a problem. So, and this is from the Pokemon Company, which the Pokemon Company is in part owned by Nintendo, but maybe they won't do Content ID claims as much. Let's see. I'm gonna make sure I follow the Pokemon trading card on Twitter, which means that all of a sudden I'm gonna start getting a lot of tweets talking about Pokemon cards. I've seen on Slick Deals 2 Pokemon packs of trading cards that Walmart is promoting, so I do think there's a chance that it's gotten fairly popular again lately because of the pandemic and people having to stay inside. But I think this would probably be a brief resurgence and not a long-running, not a long-running return to glory as far as Pokemon collectible card games. Honestly, I don't even know if there really needs to be a return to glory, because I'm not sure they ever really fell out of glory. There are definitely generations that have aged out of playing Pokemon, the Pokemon card game, but those generations are fairly easily replaced with the next generation. Moving on, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl has overview trailer and a Japanese TV commercial, which...
Stop!
Yeah, I'm still not 100% sure which one this is, because this looks more visually polished than what I thought it was. You've got these little smaller characters. I guess this is the latest Pokemon game, and it just kind of jumps from one animation style when in fights to a different animation style when you're in the top-down perspective, which I guess is fine. And I guess Shield and Sword is just done. Nobody's ever going to mention them again. So that's kind of crazy, but I guess that kind of is in line with just how Pokemon games have always gone, is that
Running is always an option.
you move on to the next game. In the past, I would say, though, you were playing as Red or Blue in the Pokemon games, not Ash Ketchum. And it felt like you were just playing as that same character for each of the Pokemon games. Now it seems like they're trying to establish that you're playing as different characters each generation of games. Which, that's different.
Smiles are
Probably
the
a
best
good thing
medicine.
too. Let's see. Gamatsu says Mobile Suit Gundam Battle Operation Code Fairy has a launch trailer. I feel like we had already seen a teaser of this. This is the one that just has a lot of animation around it, and I feel like the actual game is this, and then you're just gonna get animated cutscenes. Probably very few animated cutscenes. It actually might help if half of this game is just anime cutscenes and very little of it actually is gameplay. Of course, that would feel awkward to a lot of people, but if they've got nothing better to offer than poorly animated Gundam characters in generic looking gameplay, which is basically how I feel about what I've seen of the game. Maybe you do just put out an anime in video game form. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we did start to see more of that, where instead of an anime airing on TV in Japan and then being sold as DVDs and Blu-rays, people just start straight up saying, we're going to do full anime quality visual novels and we're going to sell them directly on Steam for $40 or $50. The problem, and the reason why that hasn't happened yet, is because still in Japan they are charging $60 for 2 episodes per Blu-ray. So they have managed to be able to rip off Japanese anime fans so much that they cannot price match that or make any savings by selling something as a video game with very minimal interaction. And VR, in anime VR, is not a thing. So there's no reason to move to computers for that reason either.
Oh, my beloved Nava.
Famitsu sales have been updated on Gametsu, showing that Mario Party Superstars is top 1 and Super Robot Wars 30 is second 1. So Super Robot Wars, super popular. It's taking the 2nd and 3rd spot between the Switch and the PS4. Fatal Frame is taking the 4th spot, so also very popular. And then Tomike Memorial Girls Side 4th Heart taking the 5th spot. And then Fatal Frame for the Switch is taking the 6th spot. So yeah, a lot of new games and a lot of games you wouldn't really expect for this first week of sales. I wouldn't be surprised if they fairly quickly drop away from those sales numbers though. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised one bit if that is going to be a limited experience. If I do this, I can do this.
Your shining faith will carry you.
And then if I do this, I can heal this. Then if I do this,
Go away!
I can evolve.
Come on, smile!
Let's see. Gamatsu says Final Fantasy VII: The First Soldier launches November 17th for smartphones. Which, yeah. I have not thought of any reason why I would be able to, why I would want to cover a smartphone game. Like this probably would be a good argument as far as the type of game you would want to play. But then I have no way to actually play and make coverage of it too. And even in this case, a smartphone game is like 7 years, 20 years before the events of Final Fantasy VII, which the remake of Final Fantasy VII is seemingly changing the timeline anyways, as far as what happens in Final Fantasy VII, so so that is a different experience also. Let's see, can we evolve?
This is how you do fireworks.
You were done for.
Kaboom! No anyone needed.
Ooh, you're a big fella.
Let's see. Moving on, sorry I went quiet there. Rogue Games and Bloober Team have announced a partnership for an unannounced console and PC game. A crazy cool concept is the quote. Rogue Games, it's the one I guess I would want to know.
You will atone
First.
for wasting my time.
Rhythm puzzle platformer in the past, Wipeout, Fist of Fluffs. Like, I don't recognize any of these games at all. Or Bloober Team. Let's see. This is not working well for me, is this? Let's see. Guess we'll check their website. And we'll go back. And we'll check their website. So Rogue Games. Neon Beast Sprawl, unicorns on unicycles.
You're gonna regret this.
Yeah, I don't recognize any of these games at all. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is just a case of Rogue Games having something published by Bloober Teams. Whereas Bloober Teams made, yes, Observer and the other horror games. The Medium came and went and failed. Observer kind of came and went and failed. Blair Witch, I think, succeeded fairly well. They had announced Layers of Fear 2, and that's what they probably are working on. So when you look at those two companies, it seems like it feels to me, and my assumption would be, is that Bloober Team has some success and some money, and they want to have a successful game, and they've kind of realized that they can't have a successful game. So they're gonna just
Perhaps you're who I've been
fund
waiting for.
somebody else to make a game and publish it, for lack of a better term. Let's see. Moving on, Gamatsu says Death Smiles 1 and 2 PS4 and Switch Western Limited and Collector's Edition pre-orders are open November 7th. Which, if I recall correctly, Death Smiles is a Japanese RPG game. Nope, it's a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up game. Which probably does have its fan base, but I'm not sure I'd count myself in it. That there is possibly something appealing to this idea. If I was going to try and play a side-scroll shooter, the play something like Death Smiles 1 and 2 since there's only 2 games and since it does look fairly polished. But I bet I could probably think of or find a better choice. A side-scrolling action-adventure game called Islets, or Islets, I think is how you pronounce it, has been announced. Yeah, looks like a side-scrolling platformer, kind of Metroidvania game. These games can be good, but then they can also get lost in the mushy middle of so many other games that are similar to something like this. Or they can look like incredibly frustrating precision platformers that I don't want to ever play. Yeah, I would say this is probably close to maybe a more cartoony Metroidvania type game. Right. 4 damage.
This is where I truly shine. It looks like I'm up. The real battle begins. I've got all the magic I need. Is that how you treat a lady? You're in good hands.
Let's just see if that works. That somehow wins for us. GameDeveloper.com says Take-Two's Q2 brings slight revenue gains. A $53 million was canceled. We already talked about that. There was a thing that I saw where Game Developer seems like they're saying they're going to move their press releases to a separate RSS feed as they've moved their website from Gamatsu to GameDeveloper.com. If that's a permanent change, then I probably, in my scrolling that is at the top here, like, probably want to update that. I don't know how many people can even read these or would read these. Honestly, I think a lot of it is more just flash than anything else. It's just there to fill out and make it look like there's more movement and action happening than people actually reading it. But yeah, I should double check at what is being shown. I am much more interested in the press releases from GameDeveloper.com than their features or their editorials. Like here they have a feature for Little Puppets, the storybook art of a rat-tastic action RPG Tales of Iron, which is a game I've not even heard of and probably isn't even out yet. Here you have actual news. Activision Blizzard net revenue is past $2 billion in Q3, so still making tons of money for a company that seems to be falling apart at the seams. Electronic Arts says NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and blockchain games are, quote, the future of our industry in an earnings call, which, yeah, that doesn't sound like something people want to hear. GameDeveloper.com has the same story. Switch hardware sales declined, but console has now sold over 92 million units worldwide. There is a report that there were no layoffs at Hangar 13 after the game was canceled. Which that's good and all, but I would also have to assume that layoffs will happen regardless, and do happen regardless of whether a game is canceled, succeeds, or fails. It doesn't matter. It is standard fare, particularly in the video game industry, to just lay off people as you can or fire people. At a certain point, you could cheat the numbers and fire people and just have BS excuses to fire people for cause instead of doing a layoff so that you don't have to pay unemployment. We don't hear a lot about video game companies trying to avoid paying unemployment, but I wouldn't be surprised if that is really what Warehouse 13 is trying to do here. And I definitely expect that it happens. There was also a story on Reddit where they were telling people, like, if your boss asks you to write a letter of apology, never do it. Which, yeah, frankly, never do it. Never apologize for anything ever. Even if you're Canadian and say sorry as a habit, never apologize. Because the way the court system works, any apology is seen as an admission of guilt, and so if you write a letter of apology for making a mistake at work, then that lets them fire you for cause and not pay unemployment, which is insane. The whole unemployment thing is really just insane as it's set up, and it's another great system that should be eliminated in favor of universal basic income. Like, so much easier to just give no questions asked income to everybody than it is to create incredibly complicated and layered with red tape systems like unemployment in an effort to capture, to trick one person into not getting unemployment. But again, that doesn't have much to do with video games, so we'll move on. GameDeveloper.com says, with over 38 million sales and counting, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is the best-selling Switch title ever. Which, if anything, I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo is a little disappointed in that, because clearly they would have wanted Mario Odyssey to be the best-selling game ever, and it isn't. And honestly, I think Mario Odyssey, compared to Mario Kart 8, deserves to be the best-selling ever. But I can also see why players would want something that is more replayable and more co-op in Mario Kart first over a single-player experience like Mario Odyssey. I don't know if we told the exact number here, but GameDeveloper.com says Devolver Digital has gone public at a valuation of $939.8 million. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if this kind of drops over the course of the next 4 years and stabilizes to quite a lot less than that. And certainly this is the backside of a company like Devolver Digital just acquiring and acquiring and acquiring more people or more companies and trying to be their own publisher. But sadly, it probably is also a good thing that they went public instead of being acquired themselves, because if Microsoft had just acquired the Devolver Digital in whole, which maybe you can do that if your company is public. Maybe Microsoft could now just buy 51% of the shares and fully own and delist Devolver Digital. I don't think there's anything stopping somebody from doing that, really. But yeah, if you had Microsoft or Nintendo or PlayStation acquired Devolver Digital, they probably would not be as focused on PC releases, and that would probably be worse for PC gamers at least. GameDeveloper.com says Konami has delayed the official eFootball launch until the spring of 2022. Anna Perina's head of Interactive is now the company president after an executive shuffle. Deborah Mahler's and former Cappy Games boss Nathan Vella are now the bosses of the Interactive division of Anna Perina. which at some point expanded to Annapurna Pictures, which is just like another company, another video game company trying to get into Hollywood for what I can only assume is fairly crazy reasons. And then Nintendo Switch Online has over 32 million members, which, yeah, that's probably not that big of a membership compared to the 92 million units sold. Yeah, your users. Yeah, what that basically boils down to is that 1 out of every 3 people with the Switch have Switch Online, and the other 2 don't. Whereas I would expect much closer to 60 or 70% of everybody that has a PlayStation or an Xbox have the online services accompanied with that at some level. We just got some games left, and this will be our last game, so we will be
Your shining faith will carry you.
done here a little early, I think. Here we have a game called Train Sim Munich, which is mixed reviewed and looks like nothing. $34.99, VR mode and enabled, bunch of languages. No to that. Here we have a game called My Simple Puzzle, which we can immediately dismiss. $8.99 English only. Here we have a game called Matergari Below Velsia, which looks like an RPG game. Yep, nothing there really that interesting. Early access, $12.99 English only. Here we have GDO Masters, which looks like it's kind of a troll joke fighting game, which, yeah, I really could not trust anybody to make a fighting game unless they had a lot of funding behind it. $9.99 English and Portuguese Brazil. Allegedly full Portuguese Brazil.
You could use
Audio.
some shine yourself.
Do I want to play this right now? Yeah, it's a shame that there isn't a way I could trust a fighting game, particularly a 3D model fighting game, to a new team, but I just don't think there's enough funding. I think you need a lot of funding to do that much animation and that much movement. Maybe at some point in the future people will start selling on Unity storefronts something that really would let anybody make a fighting game, but I don't think we've gotten to that point. I don't think we will get to that point for a while.
You're done for. Faith is an No, the smiles are not
Talk more later.
Next we have a game on Steam here called Death Slayer, which visually polished, looks kind of nice, but is probably just an asset flip zombie shooter. $14.99 English, allegedly full audio. I'll give it a follow. We'll see if anybody reviews it. Here we have Nico Mimi Niki, which is a jigsaw puzzle of anime girls from the looks of it. $1.99 English full audio. Here we have a game called Star Sand, which looks like it's an asset flip desert survival game, which we don't see a lot of that, so almost as an argument to put this on the fall list. Early access, single player only, $15.99, allegedly English full audio and several other languages. We'll put it on the fall list. At a certain point, though, I guess the question is, do I want in any way to play a survival game that is in the desert? Or is it just a case that the desert is such a harsh and inhospitable location anyways that I would not want to bother with that level of challenge? We did have Conan Exiles, which looks very similar to this, and that had the Conan name to it, plus it had more magical creatures. But Conan Exiles oddly turns into too much of a build your base simulator for its own good, and I think a lot of these survival games run into that problem where you spend too much time building and not enough time fighting and doing RPG elements. Here we have a game called Elimination Games, which is clearly just a Squid Games clone. Like I said, we're going to see a lot of these low effort clone games coming out as soon as possible for the next few months, I'm sure. $3.99 English only. Destroy an enemy follower.
That's hot.
I'm just gonna play that. Here we have a game on Steam called Demon Turf, which looks like it's a better polished. They're calling it a 3D platformer game. Just looks like this might be something. Looks like somebody's actually trying to make a game. I'm not sure if this isn't just going to be, though, a fairly boring platformer.
Time to say goodbye.
And if anything, maybe this flat animation style does not work for the actual gameplay you're seeing here. But yeah, this needs to be on the fall list. $22.49 is fairly expensive, English full audio. I think we'd seen this game before. Here we have the Mystery of Planet Venus, which just looks like an asset flip space game, $4.99 English Russian. No to that. Here we have Prison Simulator, which none of these are ever going to really interest me, I don't think. I can't imagine where I'd want to run or simulate prison. $17.99 English full audio, several other languages, it claims. Do we have... We can play this. We can do this. And we can do this. Yeah, even the like top-down, more cartoony Prison Simulator game out there, I don't think I'd really want to play. Here we have something called Flaklipa, I assume. I don't know how you pronounce an A with a circle on top of it. Probably Flipa Grand Prix, whatever that's supposed to be. Seems like it is some kind of weird racing, wacky racing type game. There might be something to this. $31.49 though is fairly expensive. English, Danish, and Norwegian. Alright. The problem here though is it's 46% positive. Already, so you just can't start off that negative on your game and make me want to play it. So I'm gonna have to say no to that. Let's see, we would need one more victory today. Do we have real reason to want to wrap up? Quickly, like with 2 hours and 29 minutes, we could easily go another 30 minutes if necessary. Here we have Vacation Adventures Cruise Director 4, which is a point-and-click adventure game, hidden object game. I think we can say no to that. $6.99 English only. Generic games like this, where you're just a vacation adventure cruise director, I think are very easy to dismiss compared to, say, a Nancy Drew game set on a cruise where there's a murder mystery and a Nancy Drew character to tie into that. Here we have a game called Baby Billy Goat, which they're calling a roguelike deck builder. I don't know if there really is a game here or not. $9.89, English, allegedly full audio. They're comparing it to Shadowverse. Which, what is Shadowverse's rating? Mostly positive, with 12,000 reviews. I'll put this on the follow list and see. I bet not much comes about for that game as far as reviews. Here we have a game called Russian Punk 2007, which clearly is just a joke asset flip game. 69 cents English and Russian. Here we have a game called Protect the Treasure, which looks like garbage. $9.99 English only. Here we have a game called Inside the Forest, which looks like it's just a survival simulation farming game. $2.54 English full audio. Here we have Dark Forest the Horror, which looks like a dark screenshot syndrome low effort horror game. $4.99 English and Russian. There is, I suppose, a fairly large difference between running around a open forest, an asset flipped forest in a horror, and then running around a building where you have to put a lot more visuals and textures because it's a building, a lot more lighting if you're going to do it right. That is very specifically why when I see a asset flip horror game that is in a building, it looks very pretty, and it's getting more and more difficult to realize that it's a low effort asset flip. But when I see one in the forest, it is incredibly easy to recognize that there's nothing happening there. Let's see. Well,
The time for perennial prayer has come.
Pain, go away!
let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Smoot's Golf First Training, which looks like a golf game with some small, like, chibi-like character, although I think they're being described as Smoots. Let's see. Free to play, single player, split screen, PvP, co-op, English, Spain, Spanish. I don't think there's anything really here as far as an actual game. This is probably a demo for something that they're going to try and make a bigger experience out of. Doesn't look terrible as an idea though. Since we're never going to get a Mario Golf game on PC, a Mario Golf clone would make sense. Here we have something called The Railway, which looks like a visual novel. But it doesn't look particularly that interesting. Like, this main character doesn't look that interesting, and then you have a distinctly different character here, and then a distinctly different looking character here, and then distinctly different character here, and it's like every time you see this main character, she's got this horrible look on her face of either uninterest or just disgust. $1.69 English Russian. Like, I don't see anything there that looks fun. I'd much prefer to play a Japanese visual novel with a smiley, cutesy anime girl instead, if I have to pick between the two.
The greater your sin, the crispier I make you.
Here we have a game called Scoutfold Night's End, which looks a little too dark screenshot syndrome-y for me. It's tagged as an RPG game with turn-based tactics. But yeah, it's just way too dark in the screenshots. Early access, $8.49. Here we have a game called Stardrich. Which looks like a game where you fly, and it's kind of a platformer, hack and slasher. They're calling it a precision platformer. I don't know if it really is a precision platformer at as far as what's being depicted here. Yeah, it's not really striking me as a precision platformer. More just a regular platformer, hack and slash game. There might be something to this, so I'll put it on the follow list. $8.49, several languages. What are we trying to do? This one. This one.
All the fluffy hugs.
Here we have a game on Steam called Coin Rush, which looks like nothing of interest. Early access, $4.99, English only. Here we have Gotchi Dash, which is obviously a troll joke game. 99 cents. Claims to support in full audio every language on Steam. Here we have a game called Where Cards Fall, which this is that puzzle platforming game. I think this should already have been on the fall list, but it's not. This is the weird game where the card gameplay mechanic and the card animation may have very little to do with the actual puzzle platforming aspect, where you are just kind of building buildings
Be gone.
or removing buildings so that you can walk in specific places at specific heights.
Oh, fluffle cakes.
This is $19.99. Says it has full audio in every language it supports, which again probably just means no voice acting. Yep, and yeah, I could see that being interesting, or I could see it being really boring.
The horizon gives me inspiration.
You're done for.
Ah, there's so much music. How about a tune?
I'm such a wimp.
Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called Recipe for Disaster. Sorry, I went quiet there again. Looks like this is just a cooking sim, or if anything, it's running an actual kitchen in the back sim. Slightly different from a cooking sim. Honestly, less fun probably than a cooking sim. The idea of having to either be the crazy head chef that's yelling at all the other cooks and abusing the other cooks, or to be one of the sous chefs that is being abused by a crazy head chef,
It won't be
which
long now.
arguably that seems to be a lot of the culture that exists in back kitchens.
No!
That and seemingly a high amount of drug use, which I could also understand some of that too. If you're being yelled at by a crazy head chef.
The best medicine. The real battle begins.
I think I've lost here.
Faith is an expensive business.
Yeah, we have a game on Steam called Undernaut's Labyrinth of Yomi, which seems like it is maybe a Chinese dungeon crawler. Definitely the art style looks a little different. Maybe Japanese.
Yeah.
This is one of those games that very possibly is still not really worth playing, but it would look different if you were deep in the dungeon crawling games. Though the problem is, people in the West are not deep into dungeon crawling games. Something like this might work fairly well in a cell phone form versus selling it for $59.99 in PC form. This is English with Japanese full audio. Yeah, I don't think for a second I can put this on the wish list. It's just like, no way, starting at that price and looking like this, would I ever get around to playing that or purchasing that. So I don't even need to really fool myself on that. Here we have a game called Recon Control, which doesn't look like anything that's particularly that interesting to me. $8.99, whole bunch of languages. Yeah, I think I can be fairly cruel and skip this game too. Yeah, we have a game called Tourney, which looks like it's a simulation where you run a tournament, which, okay, that's different. But at a certain point, it's almost like a roller coaster tycoon type game.
Get out of my way!
So I'll put this on the follow list, but people would really have to review it and like it. $12.99 English, French, German. Next we have a game called Keep Light, which just looks like a kind of horror or low effort asset flip puzzle game. It's a puzzle platformer. It's $3.99 English only. Yeah, I don't see anything here that would make me want to play it. Yeah, we have a game called Cibos, C-I-B-O-S, which looks like it's a collection of mini games, party games. So not for me, and particularly not one that would even look that interesting to me. $10.49 English and French. Here we have a game called Too Many Humans, which is a top-down zombie shooter from the looks of it. It's $7.99 English and French, and I think we can say no to that also.
The time for perennial prayer has come.
Here we have a game called Road Builder, which, yeah, I think a strategy game where you're just building roads is not enough. Yeah, I don't think that's enough of a game to interest me. $8.99 English only. Again, also fairly expensive because basically all this is a puzzle concept. It's a puzzle game, and puzzle games need to be a little bit cheaper than that, and frankly a little bit more interesting than that. Here we have Vandal Hala, which looks like it's a multiplayer first-person shooter. Seems like you jump between a lot of different buildings, which maybe there's something to that idea where you get a lot of height and you're running around a lot of different buildings. I think though the danger is you would need a dome that is just forever enclosing around those buildings. Otherwise people could hide out and snipe in those buildings for a very long time. And while some people may like that, it irritates a lot of people also. Vanderhala is $11.99, single player with online PvP. I think it's fairly focused on the player versus player aspects, so I'm gonna have to say no to it. Here we have Scarlet and Blank, which looks like a differently animated visual novel. There might be something to this. It's a fully voiced sound novel, it says. That sounds very interesting. So I'll put it on the follow list. If it gets reviews, since it's free to play, I didn't put it on my wish list. And the idea of a sound novel as a concept is an interesting thought, certainly. That doesn't quite get to the idea of just full-on doing anime level quality animation and putting it out as a video game or interactive visual novel, but it does do something kind of in that line with audio. Here we have a game called Aeternum Quest, which looks like it might be a cell phone game that's ported, but also it looks polished enough that there might be a Zelda-esque clone experience here worth playing. $9.99 English, full audio allegedly, third-party EULA, single player partial controller support. Yep, this is the kind of game that definitely is going to lean heavily on reviewers and reviews, because there could be something here that is worth playing. Although, in all fairness, if I was to play Ni no Kuni Remastered, which I have, and then come back and try and play something like this, I would immediately reject this and go, no, this is too simplistic looking. Even if there is a good story or good gameplay there, I would need reviewers to tell me that before I'd give it a chance.
May the forest
Here we have a game on Steam called Us Against Aliens, which is just a low-effort asset flip shooter. $9.99 English and Russian.
Let's play.
Here we have a game called Bricky to Me, which looks like nothing of interest. $1.99 English full audio. Here we have a game called Raging Fist, which again is just an animation, a fighting game that does not look animated nice enough for it to make sense. They are selling it for $199.99. Obviously, money laundering is happening at this point. It's split screen PvP, English and Chinese only. Either money laundering or just straight up ridiculous pricing. Let's see. Here we have a game on Steam called Fallen Flower, which is tagged as a word game. I'm not really seeing any word gameplay at all. It looks more just like a Chinese RPG. 59 cents, English and Chinese. Here we have the Colossus is Coming interactive experience, walking simulator. These kind of blurry, grainy images that it's showing as screenshots might indicate a different art style. I don't know how many walking simulators though I'd really want to play. I've already tried to cover a couple of them, and sometimes they tell a decent enough story, particularly for free, although there is a $5.99 DLC, English, allegedly full audio. Yeah, again, I'll leave that on the fall list, and we'll see if people enjoy it.
Smiles are the best medicine. And stay out.
Next, we have a game on Steam called Fatal Core, which looks like a trading card game that people are really trying for. Kind of feels a little Chinese, but it doesn't look terrible.
You are.
Free. Apparently no in-app purchases, but
Let's play.
you need to link your account. Yeah, just a totally free game. It's a community-driven trading card game. Well, you know, that's great and all, but I wonder if community-driven also equates to people just stealing art online and putting it in the game and making cards. Because I could see, like, this dog joke card here and not really matching with anything else. I guess you put this on the follow list. If there is actually a community here, a free game would get reviewed. If there actually isn't a community there, then obviously we would notice that fairly quickly.
Miasma pervades all. No, the smiles are not free.
Let's see. Next we have a game called 3 Color Ball, which obviously is a low effort Chinese game. 99 cents, English and Chinese. Here we have Anime's Jigsaw Girls, which obviously is a low effort Japanese game or Western game trying to be a Japanese game. $1.79 English only, with this huge 76 bundle, 76 game bundle for $33.31 or 33 and a penny. Here we have a game called Not Longa, which looks weird. A weird looking kind of horror point and click game, I think. $4.99 English and Italian.
Let's play.
I'm gonna be generous and put this on the fall list. It probably didn't need that. Here we have something called Polity, which looks like it's a open world farming like life sim. Not something that I would be interested in for those visuals. Free within that purchase list, third party EULA and account, English only. Here we have a game called Block Collide. Which there might be something to this as a puzzle game. $1.19. Bunch of languages supported, pretty much every language on Steam. It says it supports. I'm gonna put that on the fall list though. There's a chance.
This is where I truly shine.
Still have tons of games. I thought I would be done by now. Here we have a game called Faster Than Possible, which looks like nothing of interest. And that's why it's important to kind of finish as much games as possible. Otherwise, we're going to have a really long Monday. This is $1.49 English, allegedly full audio. I seriously doubt it. Here we have Succubus Runa and the Erotic Dungeon, which, yep, another one of these games that would have very limited nudity in it to sell it, and in reality it's just a low effort RPG, JRPG. $7.99 English, Japanese, and Chinese.
No way.
Yep. And I assume that the Erotic Dungeon as a phrase is not forbidden on Steam, which is I guess a good thing, but it seems like we've had 2 games that have ended the Erotic Dungeon. Here we have a game called Drink Board and Drinking Game, which at a certain point I think Steam and Valve probably shouldn't have drinking games or anything related to drinking games on their storefront, just for fear that somebody is going to boycott them because of that, or sue them because of that. You can sue anybody for anything, so the idea of encouraging dangerous drinking habits is probably something you don't want to be associated with. $5.99 English, French, German, Spain, Spanish, and Portuguese. At a certain point you can turn anything into a drinking game also, so there's not much of a reason to specifically have a unique drinking game. Let's see. Here we have a game called Fast and Furious Spy Racers Rise of Shifter, which I think this might actually be related to Fast and Furious movie series. If not, then I bet the phrase Fast and Furious can't be trademarked, and this has nothing to do with that. So I'll put this on the follow list. $39.99, a whole bunch of languages with full audio in some of them, which I bet that is a possibility. As a racing game, visually it looks like it might actually be decent, so it deserves a follow. Next we have a game that's all in Asian characters. Looks like it's probably a cell phone port of, I don't know, some kind of Chinese visual novel, Japanese visual novel. $4.99 Chinese only. Here we have a game called Anarchy Wolf's Law, which looks just like a asset flip first person shooter, although it's visually polished kind of nicely. It's early access, single player, $10.79, English and Russian, full audio, and several other languages. We'll put it on the fall list. The thing is, a lot of these first-person shooter games, though, I don't think they would ever have any real competition. I don't think anybody would just ever bother to actually play it.
I'm gonna rest for a bit.
Here we have a game called Longport, P-H-O-R-T, which Looks like nothing of interest. 719 English only.
Magic leap.
Here we have a game called Blue Barbarian Man,
Don't come any closer.
which looks like nothing. 299 English only. Here we have a game called Rage Chicken 2, which looks like nothing.
Don't come any
$5.99 English, allegedly full audio. Alright. And then we have a game called Mantle, which looks like nothing. It is $3.99 English only. And with that, the good news is I see the beginning of the end, so I'll leave the rest of these games for Monday, with the exception of Dawnbreaker's Aeon Reach, which clearly is one of these games that may be actually trying to have the more lewd 3D models. I don't want to say slutty, that's not fair. The more lewd 3D model characters presented and shown to make more of a mature looking game, which this definitely feels like that. The problem with this is these tend to be just like visual novels or very bad games, and they tend not to have a lot of actual game or even adult content in them, and they're selling themselves fairly highly on their screenshots. This, like, where is your spine at this point? Man, you must have a mechanical spine if you can sit up straight like this and have your hips and butt twisted at a 90-degree angle. That's a bad animation. Honestly, this game doesn't look like much. It's English, it doesn't have full audio, it's $8.99. But I'll put it on the follow list just to see if people respond to it. It says it has general mature content. It doesn't specifically say anything about nudity or sex or anything like that. So this very much may be just a teasing game that doesn't really have anything. Alright, now I am going to go through my Twitter feed. If I can get it to load, which maybe it won't load.
How about some feline fun?
Well, I will
Hey, let's play.
at the very least go through the
It all starts with the magic leap.
games that go through my other feeds. I guess I can do that much, but I suspect there isn't actually going to be that much new news since I started so late anyways, and since it's a Friday. Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a single bit of new news. And Twitter is glitched again. Like, when Twitter glitches,
May the forest be at peace. Hey, let's play.
it really glitches.
Let's play.
Like,
Berries.
so yeah, I can show here. It's just like nothing right now. It thinks I'm not following
For a bit.
anybody at all. So yeah. Alright, so at that point we do this. We do this.
You little.
We evolve here, I guess. Play this to heal.
You're in good hands.
Attack in the turn. Yep. I could cover some more games. We may just cover a couple more games and that's about it. Here we have a game called School Love Reflex, which is nothing. Some kind of, it's tagged as a top-down shooter. It doesn't really even look like that. It looks like just kind of a low-effort, almost arcade game from Chinese developers. 99 cents. Japanese only, actually, not Chinese.
Like the maggot you are.
Here we have a game called Cycled, which looks like nothing. Suppose if I had more time I could start doing a follow list cleanup, but I definitely don't want to do that right today. 1349, whole bunch of languages of this game. Civil languages. Cycled does not look like anything I want to play. Yeah. And wow, we managed to just line up everything almost perfectly. We've got all the daily quests done. I've gone nearly exactly 33 hours. So yeah, this is a good point and a great point to wrap up. And yeah, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.